Hello everyone. Today's video covers the new features which have been released by PEGA as part of their PEGA 8.7.0 version, which has been released recently. Now, as far as I have checked, I could not find any, uh, I would say, earth-shattering feature which was not given before by PEGA. 8.7 is mostly about incremental fixes. There have been certain fixes which were mostly due to popular demand. For example, certain things which were not allowed before, now they're allowed. And mostly what we have seen is there are some changes regarding App Studio. There have been some changes on different modes of doing searches on different systems and some basic, I would say, maintenance and documentation changes overall. But I haven't found anything which is specific to, uh, I mean, a completely new feature anywhere. Now, again, my coverage of those changes are limited. I have not, for example, covered things like Cosmos React. I have not checked mobile, for example, because I don't actually have a mobile instance or Pega Cosmos React instance installed in my system at the moment. So maybe when I start exploring them, I will find something really new. But as of now, it is mostly, I would say, incremental fixes which Pega has done as part of their 8.7.0 version. Now, I would go through many of these, many of these changes in groups, but there are certain changes which are not really part of any other group. For example, uh, they actually have added, Pega has added a new feature called configurations in 8.6. Now, configurations effectively allows you to set a value throughout application and you can use it across the application. So, for example, I have this configuration called enable XYZ API. I have now set the value as Boolean is true. And then you can effectively use this in App Studio throughout the entire application whenever you need any such, let's say, an enable XYZ API switch, you can simply use this configuration setting. This was something new which was introduced in PEGA 8.6. What they have changed on this one is they have now allowed either a constant value to be given or you can give a constant per production level. The calculated value from decision table was also part of 8.6. This one is new. So whenever you give the value, you can then give a different value for every environment. So if you, for example, want this switch to be enabled only on, let's say, only on prod environment, then you set the value as false for all other environments, and then you set it only as true only for prod. Apart from that, again, there might be a question that whether this can actually take, let's say, configuration setting or any kind of value that is yet to be explored. I have seen that the value is a drop down and it comes from a Boolean value. I mean, it comes from a drop down if it's a Boolean. But if I, for example, choose a text-based configuration setting like this one, this allows me to give the like a straight string value here. So it needs to be checked whether we can give a configuration setting value or a DSS value. That is to be checked. But as of now, there is no such configuration given. I don't think it will be allowed. It will probably be taking a straight string, but that is to be explored. The other option, which I found, I mean, it was very hard to classify within other things, is there is a new option within Admin Studio that in Admin Studio you can now create a new log category. This has, I think, been asked for by a lot of people before. So you can actually then add your logger. So if you, for example, want to modify an existing if, uh, if you want to modify an existing category, you can then simply open them up. You can click on this and you can either select this change log level and you can change the values from here, or what you can do is you can create a new log category here, and then you can of course add your own logger values. So for example, if I choose, I don't know, just the default one perhaps, yeah. So if I choose, let's say, let's say any of the HTTP internal HTTP logger, I can then create a new log category. This will be created by default as the log type log level of error, and then if you want, you can also change it by that same option by which you can change the log levels. So by default, it is created as an error log level. That is something which has also been added. I think this was allowed from Dev Studio before, but now it has been added on Admin Studio. So this is something which is, I would say, interesting. Not really a new feature, but it is something which has been added onto Admin Studio, so you don't have to switch back to Dev Studio to make this work. On the application development front, there has been one significant change which has been added by PEGA. That is that you have now have a system. You have something called a system settings guide, which has been provided in the PEGA 8.7 version. So if you click on this, you would be able to go to the system settings guide, which is a new option here. So if you click on it, it opens up a portal and you can see all the list of DSS values which are currently present on the system. Now, one interesting note, which I think this has been written here, is I will come to this yellow part a bit later. So, I mean, I will explain it here. So, if you create a new DSS on your own, for example, I created the system settings guide DSS. This will not show up on your system settings guide portal that you have here. If I search it, I will not find it. System settings. So if I search with it, I will not get it. Why? Because PEGA has actually written it down here. It says in its current version, this page only shows the settings that require a restart, which is effectively means that the attributes which are present within the peer config file. So others like other DSS data admin system settings would be added in the upcoming release. So it is not present in 8.7. So if your use case is to find a set of I would say infrastructure or let's say application variables which you need to change. If you want to do those things, then you can come in and use the system settings guide. But apart from that, if you want to, let's say, see your own DSS values within this page, you will be disappointed because it's not there. In front, there are some cool features introduced in PEGA 8.7. Let's go through them one by one. One of them is that there is a new field within service REST. Now, if you have worked on service REST before, you would know that in terms of documentation, Open API specification is the best way to document a service in REST. Now, normally what happens is PEGA auto generates this by using this tab where you can actually see all the information for that service. But what now has happened is, suppose for example you have a use case where you want to exclude certain attributes which are on the response, but you don't want them to see on the documentation. So what you can do is you now have an option. I'll just show this. There is this option called JSON data transform. So when you give the JSON data transform value here, and you can actually choose which which attributes to skip when doing the mapping. So if you, for example, add some fields on this mapping option, then what happens is these fields will not show up on the OpenAPI specification. Again, it needs to be fully fleshed out and needs to be tried out to see exactly how the responses look. But this, I think, is a very cool feature because this would allow you to control what attributes go into the JSON documentation. So suppose you are passing, let's say 10 or 15 fields, but you don't need to get all of them on the documentation, then you can simply pick and choose and exclude the ones which do not need to be there. The other new feature which I found, which I'm yet to find a complete use case for, is something called a searchable data page. So what happens is if you choose, suppose I've opened a random data page, and suppose you choose this option called list, and you have the mode as read only, and the scope is thread or requester, any one of them. Now all of these are now, of course, satisfied. So if you go down, you will see there's a new option called query options. Now, when you click on this checkbox, it will then apparently, as per documentation by PEGA, this will allow you to query using a JSON object. For example, if suppose you actually have some external records, some records are stored in an external system. So then what happens is you can then use a JSON, like a JSON object to query the entire record back from that external system. Now, even I'm not really sure what exactly is the use case for this, but I am figuring out something like maybe suppose you have a application which has a MongoDB integration, which is non-SQL. I mean, it is not relation. It's not I mean like a relational database. It's a very different mode of database transactions. So perhaps if you have a, let's say, a MongoDB connection, what you can then do is you can pass certain attributes of that MongoDB object directly from this data page, and that will allow you to query the records back. Now, how exactly it does it, I'm not really sure yet. I need to check it out, but that is how it would be probably. And one more thing is, I think this source is not allowed for every option. I mean, the query options is not allowed for all types of sources. I think it's allowed for data transform, it's allowed for connector, it is also allowed for activity, it's also allowed for lookup, I think. It's not allowed for lookup, sorry. It's allowed for report definition then? I don't think so. So I think it's only allowed for connector, data transform, and activity. Others, I haven't checked aggregate sources. I might check it. Yes, it's also allowed for aggregate sources, which I think is logical because aggregate sources effectively merges multiple connectors or data transform values inside it. So I think those are the options allowed. So if you, for example, want to have a robotic automation, I don't think it allows query, uh, JSON query. Now, apart from this too, there is another change which has been now made, that there is a set of rules which have now been completely deprecated by PEGA. So some of them are, I think you would find, I don't think they are present anymore, but there were rules like connect HTTP, connect JSR94. These are all now gone. Because why? Because from PEGA 8.6, PEGA has now deprecated EAR deployments. Now all of those rules, and I think you can find the full list I mean, on PDN. All of those rules used to depend on EAR based deployments. So now they are all gone. PEGA no longer supports it. In PEGA 8.6, you were allowed to like use those files. You you were allowed to use those rules effectively, but you were not allowed to create any. But now in PEGA 8.7, they're completely gone. The idea is that if you have any of those rules, connect HTTP or connect JSR94 perhaps, then you need to refactor them to much more prevalent types of integrations. For example, JSR94 I think needs to be converted into SOAP, connect SOAP, and HTTP I think needs to be connected to REST, converted to REST. So those kind of conversions has to be done before any upgrade is made in PEGA 8.7. These are usually very exotic rules. Not many applications use them. But if you have any such rules, especially connect or service rules, I mean, I think there was another rule called connect JCA adapter. I've never used it, by the way. So if you have those rules, then those are now gone. They are no longer even supported, and you can't even open those rules from the rule type option on the left. So if you have any of those rules, and you can find that list on PDN, please go through that list and then see if you're using any one of them. If you are, then you need to first change and then move to PEGA 8.7. In the case management front, there have been two changes of significance which have been made by PEGA in PEGA 8.7 version. Let me just explore them one by one. Now, the first one I think is quite simple. Normally, what we do is whenever we go into a case, we see this tab called Actions. Now, some of these are actually PEGA generated, but these two are the ones, edit details and change stage. These are the ones which have been specified by me in the case itself. Okay. Now, these come from this tab on the uh, optional actions tab inside the case workflow. Now, what used to happen is, suppose, for example, I can specify the list of actions when the case is open regarding what kind of things the user can do. But suppose I wanted to, let's say, also use any one of these actions when the case is resolved. So then I could not actually use the same App Studio or let's say the case type workflow to make that change. I had to go inside the section, modify the navigation rule to make it work for the resolved cases as well. So now that has been allowed by PEGA to modify directly from the App Studio. So what you can do is you can go to this case type and the case-wide actions, and you can select this allow when case is resolved. So when you click on this and save it, what will happen is when you submit the case and the case is closed, you will still get the option called edit details. So this is a new feature which PEGA has introduced in 8.7. The other feature which I would say a bit more is a bit more interesting is the new concept called case relationship. Now, suppose you have a requirement where you have multiple case types and you want to have and you want to establish I would say a one-to-one or a one-to-many relationship between these two cases. So then what you do is you then create something called a case reference on the data model of the parent case. So what you have to do is, let's say I have a case type called generic case, and I want to link it with a case type instance of forbearance. So what I will do is I will create a field. I will call it forbearance data. And on the type, I will select case reference. Here I will select single record. I will also create I will also select the case type. Now, when I submit this, I would forget about everything else. And I'm doing this from the Dev Studio, but I'm still following the changes which are usually done through App Studio. So if I submit this, some things will happen. I will tell you exactly what will happen. So if I save it, you can now see the property has been created. So what it does is it actually creates a new property of type single page, number one. The case class remains the same. It simply links to that case type class that you have. It then creates a new data page. The data page is the data page name is d underscore the class type the case type name, and it takes a parameter called PYID, which is how to uniquely identify that case ID, and then it creates a new single page type called forbearance data, which is the case type, sorry, the attribute name which you had used on the case type, and then it also uses a PYID property. So what it then does is, so you have this property called forbearance data, right? So as long as whenever you're using this forbearance data property, if you set the .pyd underneath it, it will automatically load all the records out of that case type into your page, this forbearance data page. Now, inside the data page, it is very simple. It simply does a lookup. Now, this is actually not really new, because this is actually a concept called linked properties, which PEGA already had. So if anyone has actually used linked properties, they will know how to do it. But this is actually now has been framed into something called a data page. If you actually had to establish a relationship like this before, I think until PEGA 8.6, you had to create a data page on your own to make this work. Now this has been supplied by PEGA directly. So now you can do this kind of relationships directly from App Studio. In terms of conversation channels, significant change has been made, which is that, when you go into digital messaging option, and if you click on this, suppose I create a new digital messaging interface. Here I now get an option called supported languages. So you can actually select a list of, supported languages. If you want a list, you can actually get it from within PDN. But suppose if I choose, let's say, German as well as Dutch. So if I choose these, I can actually then use the digital messaging interface to also support these other two languages. Now, the cool thing about this is the system automatically understands which one is the primary language. So the primary language is the one which you have specified the first. So English here is by default, it is the primary language. So what it means is, for example, if it cannot find any Dutch or German translation of any of the words which have been supplied, then it will automatically fall back to English. So this is something new, but an interesting thing to note here is this is only present on the new digital messaging interface rule. It is not present on the web chatbots which we had seen before. These are now termed as legacy chatbots. I think that is, legacy web chat interface. I think this change was already done in PEGA 8.5 or PEGA 8.6, but this is not present. I mean, multi-language support. This is not present within the earlier legacy web chat interface. It is only present within the new digital messaging rule. So that is it for now. I have explored some of the options which are now available in PEGA 8.7, but don't hold me on my word. Also, try to explore the new features on your own and see what kind of new features you find. And if you think that I have missed something, do let me know. I will definitely try to create a new video for this and release it. So that is all for now. Thank you.